Welcome to Unbreakable, the mental health podcast for everyone, where we'll discover and understand the complex art and science behind mental wellness. I'm Gopan Pillay, and I thank you for joining me today. I have 20 years of experience in the mental health field, working my way up from a mental health technician to mental health nurse practitioner for the past 13 years. I've been treating everyday people who struggle with depression, anxiety, ADHD, PTSD, alcohol, substance use, and mood disorders. My ultimate mission with Unbreakable is to provide you with useful information about mental wellness so that you will be able to help yourself or someone you love. And also if you're a provider who treats any mental health issues. With this knowledge, I hope that you will be able to open up communication with someone so that healing can begin. My first guest is Brian Cuban, who is the younger brother of Dallas Mavericks owner and entrepreneur, Mark Cuban. Brian is a Dallas-based attorney, author, and addiction recovery advocate. He has been in long-term recovery from alcohol, cocaine, and bulimia since April 2007. Episode 1, The Addicted Lawyer.
It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. I read your book, The Addicted Lawyer, recently, and it was truly amazing to hear about your path and the road to your recovery. You mentioned how some people believe in the myth that addiction is a form of moral failure or a lack of self-control, but how it's really an illness, a disease that can easily take over lives.
Sure. It has a lot of stigma to it. Even now, you'd think in 2021 would be a little more accepting of those who are struggling with this illness. But many people do still look at it as a just stop kind of thing. And if I could have just stopped, believe me, I didn't wake up one day, do my first line of cocaine thinking, well, I'm going to go to jail, have three failed marriages, lose my legal practice. Hey, and that's all great. Right?
Absolutely. Right. And you said just from that first line of cocaine, you were instantly addicted, right? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I was psychologically dependent on the drug at first, and I became physically dependent later and then addicted. We have to distinguish between these different things. Dependent is a body function, the body's reaction to a drug. You become dependent on opiates, you can become dependent on cocaine. Addiction is obsessive compulsive drug seeking behavior in the face of known consequences, right? You know you can go to jail, you know you can lose your career, and all these different bad things that can happen, but you can't stop.
Right.
And so, it was in the bathroom of a hotel in Dallas, the Crescent Hotel, and there used to be a nightclub up there, and I got introduced to a dealer, and I did my first line of cocaine, and I looked in the mirror, and literally for the first time in my life, I loved myself for that high. And I had a lot of bullying and fat shaming and stuff while I was a child, and I had gone my whole life into my 40s just literally self-loathing and hating myself.
Right. So it was actually like a psychological, that's how you felt at first, yes. Right? When you hit that first line.
Yeah. And when someone hates themselves their whole lives, and all it takes is a little line of white powder to love yourself and believe that everyone up in the nightclub now loves you, all the girls love you, and, blah, 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 blah. I wanted that again and again and again.
Yeah, you felt on top of the world.
Yes.
So we know that addiction can be correlated to physical, sexual, or emotional trauma at a young age. Okay, and you did mention the fat shaming, and I read that in the book. So, and I really appreciate how you mentioned that was a generational thing, and that's how you were able to forgive your mom, right? So can you tell us a little bit about how that fat shaming?
Sure, there was fat shaming in my family, and I used to come home from junior high here in Dallas. I call it middle school. Come home from junior high, and I would eat basically I love to eat Chef Boyardee. I love Chef Boyardee ravioli. I'd eat it out of the can. And my mom would come home. She sold real estate, and she would see me doing that. And she'd say, if you keep eating that way, you're going to be a fat pig. Now, these were the things my grandmother said to my mother. These are the things my great-grandmother probably said to my grandmother. Fat shaming in families is often generational, sometimes cultural.
Mm-hmm.
Cultural. I'm Jewish, and we came from an Eastern European Jewish family. In Lithuania, there was not a lot of money, and there was a lot of emphasis and dysfunctional emphasis on food. You've heard of kind of the stereotypical Jewish grandmother with all the emphasis around the food, and that was kind of my family. And my mother also had a very verbally and mentally abusive relationship with her mother, and my mother was also struggling with her own mental health issues at a time in the 70s where a woman talking about mental health issues, you could be put in an asylum. And we didn't talk about depression. We didn't talk about things like that for women.
Okay. So how were you able to forgive your mom, for example, or forgive those bullies? Tell me how forgiveness played a role.
It's a process. It's a process of self-exploration. I would used to be, I don't know if I am now, probably because I'm no longer connected to them because of politics stuff, not because they bullied me. But I think I used to be connected with some of those kids on Facebook. And I would be asked, don't you want to tell them what they did to you? I mean, these kids physically assaulted me. And they I got pantsed,
right.
But pantsed big time. My brother Mark had given me a pair of shiny gold bell-bottom disco pants. Yeah, this was during the era of Saturday Night Fever, and Mark taught disco, and I wore those pants to school, but Mark wasn't a big guy. They fit him fine. I had to jump up and down, spray the water bottle. My butt looked like 15 cats back there trying to get out. But my brother gave me these pants, were very close, and I was wearing them to school. And I'm walking home from school one day about a mile from our house, and the kids are making fun of them. But in my mind, these are the popular kids, the good-looking kids. This is before the internet, right? This is before Al Gore invented the internet.
Right.
The prom kings, the prom queens, getting their first kiss, their dating, all the things that I associated with peer acceptance and love and acceptance. And in my mind, if I took their fat taunts and fat shaming and bullying enough, it would be kind of like a frat. Now you're one of us, but that's not how bullying works. And we're walking home, and they decided that I was just too, quote unquote, fat to wear these pants, and they tore them off me. They physically assaulted me. They ripped them into shreds and threw them in the street down in my Fruit of the Loom tighty whities, my tube socks, and my Keds tennis shoes, and my Pittsburgh Pirates t-shirts. I grew up in Pittsburgh. T-shirt. I grew up in Pittsburgh. They went on, bro bumping each other before we called it that, and high-fiving each other. And like they'd done the greatest thing ever. I picked up the shreds and I covered up my tighty whities and waddled home. People gawked. No one stopped. I went down in our basement and I buried the shreds of those pants in the garbage and basements. In Pittsburgh, we have basements where you go downstairs, and you talk about that in Dallas and they think you're from Mars because there's no such thing here.
Right.
But in the East, we have basements. And so that was some serious trauma that I could go to that spot today and show you exactly where it happened in Pittsburgh. And so, I had a lot of resentment towards those bullies. I had resentment towards my mother, but I've been through a lot of therapy, and I'm still in therapy. And like swinging it back around, I used to be Facebook friends with some of those kids, and I'd get asked, don't you want to tell them what they did? No, of course not. Those are 60-year-old men now with children and grandchildren.
Right.
I mean, they're not
changed.
Well, even
hopefully.
regardless, what's the point?
Right.
They're not 14-year-old kids, right?
True.
What's the point of that?
But you were able to forgive them in your heart.
You find a place for it, sure, and you learn from it. And I'm not going to carry around anger against grandfathers, and
Sure.
Other people may view it differently. People have gone through serious trauma, awful trauma. And I don't tell anyone how to process theirs.
Right.
This is how I process mine. Do I think about it? Sure. Do I look back at it? Sure, because I talk about it all the time, right?
Right.
And talking about how trauma, the body remembers how trauma stays with us. But sure, and my mother and I, we've come to a place, we have a wonderful relationship today. And like I said, she was dealing with her own issues.
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't her fault, and it wasn't my fault.
Right. Were you able to talk to anybody about that bullying incident after it happened?
No, after it happened, no.
No. Okay. So you kept that to yourself.
I kept
you
it to myself. Yeah.
It. Right. Okay.
Yeah, I
for
internalized
how long?
it, and for decades.
For decades. Okay.
For decades.
So nobody knew about that incident for decades.
Nobody.
Okay. But it was festering.
Except the kids who did it to me.
Right. Of course. So they spread that around at school too?
Sure. And in those days, back in the boomer era, going viral meant 15 kids in the lunchroom knew about it, right?
Right.
But it didn't hurt, but it still hurt. And so that stayed with me. There's a book called The Body Remembers, and it remembers trauma. And I believe that all of us are snapshots of different types of trauma, right? We all view trauma differently. My trauma may not be trauma to someone else. Another kid may have turned around and fought them all.
Mm-hmm.
But that isn't who I was. I was very classic middle child syndrome, very shy, very needing of acceptance. And I didn't stand up to him. And that stayed with me for a long time. And it was one of the environmental factors that I truly believe formed the person who needed to change how he felt about himself through substances and alcohol.
Sure. So would you say that you regret not standing up to them in any way?
I don't believe in revisionist recovery. It happened. That's how it happened. It got me sitting here with you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But sometimes when we think about, could we have done something different at that point?
If there was something I could have done different, then I would have done something different.
I 100% agree with that. Okay. So in the book, you mentioned that your eating disorder began freshman year at Penn State University as a way to cope with the body dysmorphia.
Yes.
Right? So can you elaborate a little bit more on how that progressed? The eating disorder?
And that ties again into the bullying incident and how I felt about myself. I had gone from a quote unquote, I believe we're fine however we look, but a quote unquote normal weight as other people might see it, to a fairly obese kid. And I had a lot of body shame of myself. And factoring in that incident, I began to see nothing but this fat pig when I looked in the mirror. And this was 1979, before anyone was talking about eating disorders for men or women. Yes, guys do get eating disorders. About 30% or more of all those with eating disorders are men, and only 1 in 10 will seek treatment. That's how shameful it is. But I transitioned from restricting my food intake into bulimia, which is binging and purging. I didn't know what it was. It was more of an instinctive act. But every time I binged and purged, I got this kind of temporary feeling of peace. The next day, those bullies would like me. The next day, girls would like me. But then when that peace went away, it's kind of when the cocaine high comes, when you come down off the cocaine high, the shame sweeps in. And in 1979, it was the shame of engaging in an act that I didn't have a name for, I didn't understand, but I needed to have that feeling of peace and contentment again and again and again. But I also knew guys just don't stick their fingers down their throat, right? And go into the bathroom in the dorm and turn on the water, flush the toilet, and purge.
To drown out the noise.
Yeah, right? It was shameful. And it was shameful, but I didn't know why. But I didn't know what it was called.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you also started exercising beyond moderation.
Yeah, right? So that's exercise bulimia. What exercise bulimia is obsessive compulsive exercise for the primary purpose of offsetting calories. I developed a very unhealthy relationship with food and exercise, something I struggle with today still, where I would run 10 miles a day, 20 miles a day to offset anything I'd eaten. And I wasn't eating much. So I lost a lot of weight. And it wasn't a healthy way to lose weight. It was very destructive to my body. And I'd also begun drinking heavily as well.
So did anybody notice this?
Sure. And I got all accolades.
Oh, accolades.
Nobody was talking about eating disorders in 1980, right?
Right.
Karen Carpenter, the wonderful singer for the Carpenters, passed away in 1983 from complications related to anorexia. And that kind of brought eating disorders into the pre-digital national spotlight, but it also kind of cemented the stereotype of it as a woman's disorder.
Right.
And so, we weren't talking about any of that.
Okay. So nobody confronted you about it or asked you any questions about it because it seemed healthy? It looked healthy?
I was gaining weight, yeah. I mean, I was losing weight and looking good. And to me, I was looking good. But here's the problem. Because of the body dysmorphic disorder, which is a clinical diagnosis in the DSM-5, no matter how thin I got, I was looking in the mirror and still seeing this huge fat pig.
Right. And I remember in the book, you did mention that you would have to get drunk in order to even look in the mirror, right?
That's right. Or I would walk. I wouldn't look. I wouldn't look at my reflection, or I would touch myself. I would see my reflection and touch my chest or touch my face because I felt deformed, even though there was no deformity.
Right. Okay. Well, one of the quotes from your book that I really love and appreciate is when you said, "We're all much more likely to wreck our lives by allowing addiction to progress than in confronting it. No one ever ruined their life by getting sober." So what do you believe is the first step when it comes to recovery and healing? Oh,
you have to want to get help. You have to want to recover and heal.
Right. So that means not being in denial about it, right?
Yeah, that's one way to phrase it. Yeah. I mean, or just not have any self-awareness about it. I mean, there were times I was in denial, and there were times where I just had no interest in stopping using cocaine or stopping drinking. And if somebody would have said, maybe you should, I said, you kidding? You know, I'm dating girls half my age. I'm doing this. I'm doing that, right? I'm Mark Cuban's brother. If I have no identity of my own, so I'll be that and be this, cocaine and alcohol douchebag around Dallas. And I didn't want to stop, and I would have had no desire. But then I got arrested, and there were a lot of different things going on, and there comes a point where, I was in denial that I had a serious problem.
Can you describe what led up to your first mental health hospitalization?
I sent